You think you are living your life, but you are not. You are merely a puppet operated by the dead ghosts of your subconscious mind. Your past, your parents, and your society have turned your mind into a junkyard, and you are carrying this garbage as if it is your treasure. This is why you feel stuck, not because the world is blocking you, but because you are trapped in a prison made by your own conditioning. Stop searching for new paths in the outside world. Unless you completely cleanse this inner darkness, every new step you take will lead you to the exact same dead end. Wake up, look within, and burn down the old blueprint before it destroys your entire life. Beloved friends, fellow travelers on this beautiful earth, lovers of life and silence, I am happy you are here, sitting close to me, listening not just to my words, but to the space between the words. We are here to share an abundance, a certain joy that has nothing to do with any market value. Before we go deep into the mystery of why you feel so stuck, so paralyzed in your day-to-day existence, let me ask you to do a simple thing. If your heart resonates with this presence, if you feel that this communion brings light to your path, take a moment to subscribe to this channel, leave your reflection in the comments, and share this vibration with those you love. It is not a business transaction. It is a way to allow this river of consciousness to flow far and wide, reaching the hearts of millions who are waiting in darkness. It is a little difficult for me to speak again. It has been difficult always, because my whole life I have been trying to speak the unspeakable. The world of language, concepts, philosophies, and the world of utter silence are so diametrically opposite to each other. They do not meet anywhere. They cannot meet by their very nature. Silence means a state of absolute wordlessness, a vacuum, an innermost zero. To speak to you now feels as if I am learning the language again from ABC. For 30 years, I spoke continually, and it was a tremendous tension because my whole being was constantly pulled inwards towards the abyss of silence. While I was pulling myself outwards towards words to convey something of the ultimate reality to you, there was no other way to convey it, and I carried a tremendously important message. There was no way to shirk that responsibility. The day I realized my own being, it was such an absolute fulfillment that all my questions simply dropped away. There was no quest left, no query left. I remember one of my professors in the university a world-renowned man who used to teach philosophy. He would often ask me to ask him a question because that is what students are supposed to do. But I would tell him that I have answers. I do not have any questions. He would laugh and say that I am crazy, for how can one have answers without having questions? But I insisted to him, and I insist to you now, while you have questions, you will never find the answer. Unless your questioning drops away completely, the true answer will not appear. And when it comes, it does not arrive in the form of a verbal reply. It simply answers all your dilemmas. It does not answer any particular question. It simply dissolves all questions, the possible, the impossible, the probable, and the improbable. After my enlightenment, I remained silent for exactly 1,315 days. It was a beautiful period, a period where the inner vacuum was pulling me so deeply that there was no need for communication. But a very strange man, a man who had remained silent his entire life, forced me to start speaking again. His name was Magga Baba. He had no other possessions in the world except a simple plastic jug, a magga, from which he would drink and accept food. He never spoke a word to anyone. People would drop money, food, or water into his jug, and anyone who wanted to take from it, beggars or children, were allowed to do so. He never prevented anyone from giving, and he never prevented anyone from taking. Deep in the cold winter nights, when the crowds had gone, I used to visit him. And one night he looked at me and said, "Look, I have remained silent my whole life, but the people do not hear, they do not listen, they cannot understand silence. It is far beyond their capacity. I have failed to convey what I have been carrying within me, and now my time on this earth is short. You are young, you have a long life before you. Please do not stop speaking. Start talking to the world." It is an almost impossible job to convert silence into sound, to translate the wordless state of consciousness into the mundane currency of language. But I understood his point. He wanted to save me from the disappointment of absolute isolation. He knew that if I did not start speaking soon, the inner silence, the innermost zero, would go on pulling me so deeply inwards that a time would come when I would never be able to come out. I would be utterly blissful, but the whole world would remain full of misery, and I would have failed to show the way to those who are capable of walking on it. So I promised him I would do my best, and for 30 years continuously I went on talking on every subject under the stars. But a moment came when I realized that words were no longer enough. I had thrown my net far and wide to catch as many potential souls as possible. Those days of silence that followed were a beautiful weeding process. Those who were only intellectually curious, rationally interested in my philosophies, dropped out. That was good, because they were clinging to me only because their intellect felt satisfied. And I am not here to satisfy your intellect. My purpose is far deeper, of a totally different dimension. The silence helped me find my authentic people. Those who do not need words to be with me. They can sit with me in utter silence, and the communion happens. Communication is through words. Communion is through silence. Today, those who remain are those for whom my presence is enough, for whom the gesture of my hand or the look in my eyes is sufficient. Language is no longer a necessity between us. Yet, I have chosen to speak to you again, because the picture I have been painting all my life needs a few finishing touches. When I became silent, everything was left incomplete. Before I depart from this physical body, I want to complete the canvas. Throughout my life, I have spoken to Hindus, to Christians, to Jews, to Mohammedans, to Buddhists, to Jainas. I had to use their language, their prophets, their scriptures. To speak to a Hindu, I had to speak through Krishna, and I was not happy about it. It was a necessary evil. To speak to a Christian, I had to speak through Jesus, and I was never at ease with it. I did not agree with Jesus or Krishna on all points, but to touch those disagreements would have been destructive to the fragile minds who were clinging to their old conditionings. Now you are clean. People say that I am brainwashing my sannyasins. No, I am not brainwashing you. I am simply washing your brains, and I believe in a thorough dry cleaning. Now I can tell you exactly what I feel, directly, immediately, without the burden of any past tradition. The whole world is stuck because it is divided into ancient folds of dirt. One person is a Christian, carrying one kind of theological dirt. Another is a Hindu, carrying another kind of cultural dirt. You cannot find a single person who is clean, who is a fresh sheet of paper. You are stuck in your lives because you are carrying a massive accumulation of unexamined beliefs, repressed desires, and borrowed conditionings in your subconscious mind. This is the one thing you must cleanse first, If you ever want to experience freedom and flow, if you feel a deep urge to support this work of absolute mental purification, if you wish to help us preserve these insights and reach more sleeping souls, look at the join button on your screen. By becoming a member of this spiritual family, or by offering a gesture through super thanks, you participate in a cosmic sharing. We also have detailed electronic manuals, our e-books, crafted to guide your awareness through the dark labyrinths of the mind. These are not commercial commodities. They are tools for your awakening. Let us look directly at why humanity is so paralyzed. Look at all the old religions. They are all based on fear. A real religion must destroy fear. It cannot be rooted in it. The very concept of God in all the old traditions is born out of human terror, out of a need for consolation. There is no validity, no scientific proof, no objective evidence for the existence of a personal God sitting in heaven. The people who believe in such a God are simply individuals who cannot trust in themselves. They are immature, childish. Their mental age has stopped somewhere near 12 years. They need a father figure, a big daddy in the sky who will protect them, guide them, and save them from the dark reality of death that comes closer with every passing breath. God is a projection of your fear. The moment your fear disappears through deep awareness, you will find there is no God. The moment you are able to trust in your own existence, to be utterly yourself, the concept of a personal God will make you laugh. Look at Jesus. He is constantly praying to the sky, raising his hands towards the heavens, hearing voices, receiving messages. To tell you the truth, these are symptoms of a profound neurosis. Jesus was a nice fellow, a good person, but he was a deeply misunderstood and radical personality. He was a fanatic, carrying an incredibly rigid and uncompromising mind. He was a fascist in his spiritual claims. He believed that only those who followed him would be saved, and anyone who dared to choose their own path would be cast into eternal hell. Only a simpleton can make such claims. Who is he to save anyone? Yet he truly believed he was the only begotten Son of God. He believed it so deeply that he waited for a miracle even on the cross. It was only the crucifixion that brought a little sanity to his mind. Hanging on that cross, realizing that no angels were descending from the sky to rescue him, he cried out, "Why have you forsaken me?" He was waiting for a magical event that never happened, because miracles do not happen. They have never happened in the history of the universe. They are nothing but the wish fulfillments of a mind that is dreaming and hallucinating. If you believe in miracles, your own belief creates the hallucination, and it appears more real than reality itself. Jesus was deeply split in his manifestations. He would say, "Blessed are the meek, for theirs is the kingdom of God." But he himself was not a meek person. He was tremendously arrogant. If you are burdened with Christian conditioning, you will not see it. But once your mind is washed clean, you can see his arrogance clearly. He enters the great temple of the Jews, turns over the tables of the money changers, takes a whip in his hand, beats them, and throws them out. And yet he talks of humbleness. He and his disciples are hungry, and they enter a village where the people refuse to give them food. He becomes furious. They pass by a fig tree. It is not the season for figs, so the tree is empty. Jesus becomes so mad at the tree that he curses it, saying, "You are against us. You will not provide food for us." What kind of sanity is this? Crying and cursing a fig tree because it does not bear fruit out of season. Even his own master, John the Baptist, who was imprisoned, became suspicious of Jesus' behavior. He sent a message from his jail cell asking, "Are you truly the Messiah for whom we have been waiting, or should we look for someone else?" John became suspicious because the things Jesus was saying and doing were completely contradictory. He was not behaving like a religious man. A truly religious man cannot take the standpoint that he is special, that he is the only begotten Son of the Divine. A religious man comes to realize that he is utterly ordinary as a blade of grass, a mountain peak, or a distant star. He does not claim any superiority, because the very idea of specialness is a game of the ego, and the ego is the source of all arrogance. The same neurosis has corrupted all other traditions. I have spoken on Mahavira, the great master of the Jainas, but I cannot agree with his guidelines or his behavior. They are absolutely against nature. Mahavira lived completely naked. Now, it is not an accident that human beings invented clothes. Clothes are a natural physical requirement for survival. Animals grow thick hair over their bodies to protect themselves from the freezing cold. Man does not have that capacity. Man is a hot-blooded animal. He needs protection. To force human beings to go naked in the name of spirituality is idiotic. Mahavira prescribed that his disciples must not use even the simplest instruments like a razor blade. If you want to cut your hair, you must pull it out by the roots. Every year, Jaina monks sit down and pluck their hair out, drop by drop, blood oozing from their scalps. This is so stupid, so ugly, so masochistic. And for what purpose? The justification is that through this self-torture, you earn virtue, and that virtue will open the gates to a high heaven. On one hand, these religions teach you to drop greed, and on the other hand, they feed your greed for the pleasures of the next world. This is far more dangerous than ordinary worldly greed. Having a beautiful house or money in this life is nothing compared to the greed for eternal, everlasting pleasures in 7 heavens. All old religions are anti-life. They are against laughter, against joy, against nature. No religion has ever accepted a sense of humor as a fundamental quality of religiousness. They want you to be solemn, sad, long-faced, as if you are constantly attending a funeral. My religion is the first religion that takes man in his totality, in his absolute naturalness. It accepts you as you are, with all your instincts, your desires, your body, and your soul. To me, the word holy does not mean something sacred and apart from the world. It simply means something that has become whole. You have all the beautiful ingredients within you, but they are mixed up like a jigsaw puzzle. They are not in the right place. My work is to help you put everything in its proper place so that a deep harmony arises. Out of that harmony emerges a true man of character, a truly moral and religious being. Old religions are based on closed belief systems that you are never allowed to question. They are beautiful fictions, but they are fictions all the same. If you ask, how do you know God created the world? They have no answer, because there could not have been an eyewitness. If an eyewitness was already there to see the creation, then that moment was not the beginning of the world. The world was already in existence, and the witness was part of it. You are forbidden to doubt, because to doubt means your name is put on a blacklist, and 7 hells are waiting to torture you with devices that would make the most ruthless political authoritarians in history look like amateurs. Christianity throws you into hell for eternity for the sins committed in a short lifespan of 70 years. Even if you commit sins continuously 24 hours a day for 70 years, an eternal punishment cannot be justified. It is an absurd, monstrous assumption. They are simply exploiting your fear and manipulating your greed to keep you enslaved. I do not promise you any heaven, and I do not make you afraid of any hell, because there is none. I do not ask you to follow me, because that is a fascist attitude. Jesus says, "Come follow me." My book on Jesus was titled with those words, but that was his statement, not mine. If you ask me, I will say, never follow me. Do not follow anyone, because I am myself completely lost. Unless you choose to be lost forever like me, then it is perfectly okay. My sannyasins are not my followers, they are my fellow travelers, my friends, my lovers. You have seen something in me the way you see your own reflection in a mirror. You do not become a follower of your mirror. When you stand in front of it, you see your own face clearly. The Master is nothing but a pure mirror. He does not do anything. It is his very nature to reflect. His being, his silent presence, becomes a source of reflection, so that slowly, you begin to see your own reality in a new light, from a new dimension. Old religions are based on faith. My religion is pure science. The word science means to know. Of course, it is a different kind of science from what is taught in your universities. That is objective science. This is subjective science. Have you ever pondered on the word object? It means that which obstructs you, that which comes in your way as a hindrance. Objective science tries to observe the objects that surround you so that they no longer hinder your life, but instead become stepping stones, tools to be used for comfort. Subjectivity is the exact opposite. It is an abysmal depth where nothing obstructs you. Once you let go, you fall into a fathomless abyss. This falling is not a catastrophe. It is the ultimate homecoming. In this fathomless depth of your own subjectivity, you do not encounter a personal God sitting on a golden throne, managing the universe like a cosmic bureaucrat. You encounter a tremendous presence, a vital energy that is alive, moving, and infinitely creative. I do not believe in a personal creator, because to think of the divine as a person is simply a projection of the human mind. The Chinese project a god with a Chinese face. The Africans project a god with an African face. And the Jews give their god a distinctively Jewish nose. If horses could think about a supreme being, their God would undoubtedly look like a magnificent horse. This is nothing but human arrogance, projecting its own limited form onto the infinite playground of existence. When I say there is no God, I am denying personality to the universe. I am freeing the divine from the narrow cage of human attributes. God is not a person, but there is an overflowing, magnificent quality of godliness. It is an impersonal, pristine energy that vibrates in every atom, in every leaf, in every star. To impose a static human form upon this vast expanse of creativity is an insult to existence. To understand this deeply, you must understand that the universe consists of verbs, not of nouns. Nouns are a human invention, a linguistic convenience to help us navigate the world, but they are fundamentally false to reality. Existence is entirely composed of verbs. You look at a rose outside your window and you call it a flower. By calling it a flower, you turn it into a static noun, a dead object. But in reality, it has not stopped its dynamic process. It is still flowering. It is a continuous movement, a magnificent flow. You look at a river and you give it a static name, but the river is always rivering. The water you see this moment is gone the next. It is a continuous stream of change. Everything in this cosmos is changing, flowing, mutating. The child flows into youth, youth flows into old age, life turns into death, and death turns back into life. It is an unbroken continuum where there are no full stops. Full stops exist only in human grammar and human ignorance. They do not exist in the organic architecture of the universe. If you close your eyes and look within your own consciousness, you will find that everything that has ever happened to you is still there, moving like a deep subterranean river. You have not stopped being a child at any specific date or time. That child is still flowing within you, absorbing new currents, expanding into a larger body of water. When a river reaches the ocean, it looks vast and majestic, but the tiny current that emerged from a small stone mouth far up in the freezing peaks of the mountains is still alive within it. It has simply gathered countless rivulets along its journey, becoming oceanic. Existence never rests. There is no pause, no demarcation line where one thing ends and another begins. It is an ever-flowing, ever-evolving process. When you use the word God, you are using a dead, static noun. When I use the word godliness, I am pointing to something that is dynamic, alive, breathing, and dancing. I remember a beautiful encounter with one of my university professors, a magnificent scholar named Professor Roy, who was considered a great authority on Western and Eastern philosophies. On my very first day in his class, he was giving an eloquent lecture on the concept of the absolute, which is the philosophical term used for a perfect, unchangeable God. I stood up and asked him a simple question that shook his entire life. I asked, "Is your absolute perfect and complete, or is it still growing? If it is still growing, then it cannot be absolute. It must be imperfect, because growth implies that something is missing, that a new flower or a new branch is still possible. But if it is perfect and complete, entirely finished with no possibility for further growth, then it must be dead. A thing that cannot grow can only be dead. So I asked him, "Tell me honestly, is your God alive or dead?" He looked at me, completely stunned. He had spent his entire life writing books and earning doctorates from Oxford. Yet nobody had ever presented him with such a fundamental dilemma. He asked for time to think, and for a week, every time he entered the lecture hall, he would shake with nervousness because he knew I would stand up and ask for his answer. Finally, he admitted that he could not choose either side, because to say God is imperfect destroys his philosophy, and to say God is dead destroys his heart. He was such a beautifully honest man that he asked me to move out of the university hostel and live with him in his home, saying that he had more to learn from a rebellious student than from all his academic books. The traditional concept of a perfect, finished God has turned the entire universe into a dead machine, and it has turned human beings into mechanical puppets. This is why you feel so profoundly stuck in your life. You have been trained to worship dead nouns, static ideals, and unalterable dogmas. You are constantly trying to live up to a ready-made pattern created by people who died thousands of years ago. Look at the statements made by the old prophets. Jesus tells his disciples, "Come follow me." Krishna tells Arjuna, "Leave everything else behind and come to my feet for your ultimate deliverance." Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, they all demand that you surrender your own eyes, your own legs, and your own intelligence, and place your absolute faith in them. To me, this is a psychological crime of the highest order. It is an exploitation of human weakness. When you start following somebody, you automatically become an imitator. You lose your unique identity, your authentic face, and you cover yourself with a phony, hypocritical mask. You become a Christian, a Hindu, a Mohammedan, or a Buddhist, but you cease to be a living, breathing, undivided individual. You split your own soul into two, creating a perpetual state of inner conflict and suffering. The leaders of the past have crippled humanity because they fulfilled a very primitive, childish need within you. Human beings are terrified of standing on their own 2 feet. They do not have the courage to venture into the unknown and create their own path through their own living experience. They want to be led. They want a shepherd, which automatically means they are willing to remain sheep. But they do not realize that if you are constantly being led by someone else, your own eyes will slowly lose their capacity to see. Your legs will become paralyzed from disuse. The leader requires you to disable your own critical intelligence because your doubts are a disturbance to his authority. He wants you to see through his eyes and walk with his legs. This is why the entire world is in such an agonizing state of misery. Every individual is unique, unrepeatable, and a completely fresh expression of nature. There has never been an individual like you before, and there will never be another one like you again. If you attempt to duplicate a Jesus, a Buddha, or a Mahavira, you are betraying the unique potential that existence has planted within your seed. You will spend your life trying to turn a rose into a lotus, wasting your vital energy in a hopeless, unnatural effort, and you will end up being neither a lotus nor a rose. I do not call myself a leader, and I absolutely refuse to have any followers. The very word leader is nauseating to me. It belongs to the domain of trivial, third-rate politics, not to the sacred realm of religious consciousness. In politics, you need a greater idiot to lead the smaller idiots. But in true spirituality, what is required is a magnificent flowering of individual intelligence, not a blind mob following a master. I am not here to offer you a ready-made path or to sell you a guaranteed ticket to a fictional paradise. I can only say to you, come and share my abundance. Come and drink from the ecstasy that has flowered within my being. When a dark cloud is heavy with rainwater, it does not oblige the dry earth by showering upon it. It is the earth that is doing a favor by receiving the abundance. I am overflowing with a tremendous bliss, a profound silence, and I am grateful to you for being available to share it. My work is not a business transaction based on a future reward after death. It is an immediate, spontaneous communion of love here now. Look at the clever business that old religions have been running for centuries. They exploit your existential boredom, your fear of meaninglessness, and your terror of death. The human mind is intrinsically incapable of living with an empty space. It desperately demands a sense of purpose. If you do not know why you are getting up every morning, why you are going through the same boring routine of your office, your family, your social obligations, a deep anxiety arises within you. To cover up this hollow vacuum, the priests created the magnificent fiction of God, heaven, and eternal rewards. They tell you that your suffering in this life is part of a divine plan, a cosmic test to prepare you for the exquisite pleasures of paradise. Muhammad promised his followers a paradise flowing with rivers of fine wine, filled with beautiful eternal women who never age beyond 16 and even young. Beautiful boys for the special saints who have repressed their natural instincts throughout their earthly existence. This is nothing but a cheap commercial bargain. They take your reality, your integrity, your present moment, and in return they give you an invisible, intangible commodity called hope. They keep you drugged with the illusion of tomorrow, while your real life slips away like sand through your fingers. Why do you think the human race is so addicted to following? It is because the pattern of psychological slavery is deeply ingrained in your childhood. Every child is born into a world of giants, into a family where the parents, the elders, the teachers, and the priests possess all the power and all the answers. The child is completely helpless, dependent on them for survival, and out of that helplessness, he begins to imitate them. He drops his own spontaneous laughter, his own wild curiosity, his own natural instincts, and adopts the mask that his society forces upon him. He is praised when he is obedient, and he is severely punished when he shows even a spark of independence or rebellion. Stupidity and conditioning are passed down from one generation to another like a sacred inheritance. By the time you become an adult, your mind is a crowded marketplace filled with the borrowed voices of the dead. You do not know who you are. You only know what they told you to be. Your subconscious mind is a dark, cluttered basement filled with repressed desires, unlived dreams, and toxic fears. This is the exact reason why you feel completely stuck, heavy, and immobilized in your journey. Let us trace the history of this dangerous illusion of a Messiah who will come to save you. It began long ago with Moses, who was undoubtedly a tremendously powerful, charismatic leader. He found the Jews living as crushed, humiliated slaves in Egypt, forced to build the monumental pyramids under the continuous lash of the Egyptian whips. Millions of human beings died in the burning sands just to satisfy the megalomaniacal egos of kings and queens who wanted their graves to be the tallest, grandest structures under the sun. Moses did a miraculous thing. He filled these hopeless slaves with a grand dream. He convinced them that they were not ordinary laborers, but the chosen people of God, and that He would lead them out of their chains into a promised land flowing with milk and honey. This was an exquisite utopia, a brilliant political drug that gave them the immediate energy to rebel and escape into the desert. But a dream is very easy to project while reality is immensely difficult to materialize. Moses took his people into the vast, hostile desert of the Middle East, and for 40 years continuously they wandered in the barren sands. There was no promised land, no rivers of milk, no paradise opening its gates. During those 40 years of unimaginable suffering, 3/4 of the original population died of starvation, thirst, and sheer exhaustion. The children who survived had never seen Egypt. They had only known the agonizing reality of dragging their feet through the blistering heat, begging for food from passing caravans. Slowly the people began to grow angry, frustrated, and deeply resentful. They realized that their charismatic leader had cheated them, that he had led them into a worse hell than the one they left behind. Jerusalem was nothing but a barren, rocky desert. They were ready to revolt, perhaps even to kill Moses. Seeing the imminent danger, Moses played a masterful diplomatic trick. He told his people that his physical eyes were failing, that he was old, and that he had to leave them to search for a lost tribe that had vanished during the long journey. He gave them a new dose of the opium called hope, declaring that God had promised him that a Messiah would arrive soon to redeem them from all their miseries, restore their kingdom, and open the true doors of salvation. With this clever excuse, he escaped the wrath of his followers and vanished into the mountains. He never returned to Jerusalem. He traveled far to the east and eventually died in the beautiful valley of Kashmir, where his actual grave still lies today. It is a supreme irony of history that both Moses and Jesus died in the exact same place in India, escaping the fanaticism of their own followers. Moses created the very concept of a Messiah to hide his own absolute failure as a leader. He left his people waiting for a phantom savior, a psychological anchor to keep them submissive, dragging their chains generation after generation, always looking towards the future for a redemption that will never come from the outside. This is why I say to you, accept your absolute responsibility for your own life. Nobody else can redeem you. Nobody else can break your chains, because you are the one who is in love with your own bondage. You sit in your self-created misery, watering the very causes of your suffering, and then you look towards the sky, waiting for a Jesus, a Krishna, or a Buddha to lift you out of the ditch. It is an exercise in total futility. If you are miserable, you and you alone are responsible for it. The moment you drop the false expectation that a savior will arrive to solve your problems, a tremendous maturity happens within you. You stop throwing childish tantrums, you stop looking for external crutches, and you realize that the key to your freedom is hidden within your own consciousness. Doubt is not a sin to be suppressed by a rigid belief system. It is a sharp scientific tool of inquiry. All your beliefs are nothing but a decorative skin covering a deep ocean of hidden doubt. If you scratch a believer just a little bit, his repressed skepticism will immediately flare up in the form of fanaticism and violence. A man who truly knows does not need to believe. He has tasted the reality. He has opened his own eyes and seen the sun. I do not want you to accumulate more beliefs from me. I want you to discard all your borrowed luggage, step out of the crowd, and face your own aloneness with absolute clarity. The crowd is always terrified of the authentic individual because a person who has reclaimed his own intelligence is bound to be a rebel. He can no longer be manipulated by the priest or utilized as a tool by the politician. Look at the ancient institutions of the past. They are all designed to keep you mechanical. Look at the institution of marriage. It is nothing but a legalized, respectable form of transactional arrangement. It is a plastic substitute for real love. True love is a living, breathing reality. It arises like a beautiful rose, spreads its fragrance to the winds, and when its season is over, it naturally fades and dies. But because human beings are deeply insecure, terrified of the unpredictable nature of life, they brought the law in between them. They created a permanent contract, a social cage to force two people to live together even when the juice of love has completely evaporated. They go on pretending, wearing false smiles, sleeping in the same bed while their hearts are miles apart. This constant hypocrisy creates a thick, toxic layer of repression in your subconscious mind, making you feel utterly stagnant and stuck. To cleanse this inner stagnation, you do not need to follow a new set of rules or worship a new master. You need to become completely aware of the games your mind is playing. You must drop the double standards, the forced moralities, and the artificial ideals that go against your very nature. Fall in tune with the rhythm of existence. Flow with the spontaneous current of the present moment, and let your unique individual life burst forth into a magnificent dance of freedom. Remain silent, watch your mind closely, and let this inner purification happen naturally, right now, in this space. To look deeply into this inner space, one must examine the profound wounds inflicted upon the human psyche by the fear of our basic biological nature. If you feel completely stuck in your life, you must understand that the root of your paralysis lies in the deep systemic condemnation of your most vital life forces. For centuries, the so-called holy guardians of human morality have been terrified of one specific phenomenon, and that is sex. It is the single point upon which all old religions, despite their thousands of differences, are in absolute perfect agreement. They are all fiercely against sex, and because they are against sex, they are naturally and inherently against the woman. The condemnation of the woman is a direct, unavoidable corollary of the condemnation of sexuality. Man cannot exist without the woman. He is born out of her womb. Yet he has spent thousands of years showing a nauseating, systematic disrespect towards womanhood because she is the ultimate symbol of his natural, biological temptation. Why are these messiahs, avatars, and priests so profoundly terrified of sexual energy? It is because sex is the greatest, most potent energy within the human organism. It is the very source of life, the creative spark of the universe, a powerful biological pull that connects you directly to nature. It is an immense, unconscious force. Every single cell of your physical body is vibrant with it, built from it, sustained by it. Your tiny, superficial conscious mind is nothing compared to the massive, tidal movement of your unconscious sexual energy. Because it is so vast and unpredictable, the weak human ego lives in constant fear of being completely overwhelmed by it. The priests quickly realized that if a man is allowed to be naturally whole, joyful, and satisfied in his biological life, he cannot be manipulated. A content, fulfilled human being does not go to the temple to beg for a fictional paradise. He is already living in paradise here now. Therefore, to make you dependent, to turn you into submissive slaves, they had to poison your roots. They chose the easiest method available, a method that requires no intelligence at all, absolute repression. Repression is the tool of the mediocre and the stupid. To understand an energy, to transform it through deep awareness and meditation, requires tremendous intelligence, patience, and sensitivity. But to repress an energy requires nothing but blind brutality. You simply push it down into the dark basement of your subconscious mind and pretend it does not exist. I have met hundreds of monks, ascetics, and saints all over India, belonging to every imaginable tradition. And I have observed a terrifying law of human psychology. The more intensely a person represses his sexuality, the more utterly stupid he becomes. Intelligence is a delicate, high-level luxury of human consciousness. It requires an immense amount of refined energy, nourishment, and physical well-being to function optimally. When your entire life force is locked in a desperate, exhausting war against your own biological roots, there is no energy left to rise to the higher centers of your being. You become dull, dead, and utterly devoid of life's natural gusto. Look at the Jaina monks of India, who practice the most extreme forms of sexual repression in the world. They starve their bodies, they refuse to take baths, and they live under a mountain of rigid artificial rules. They are forbidden from eating anything that contains vital proteins or vitamins because their ancient scriptures, written thousands of years ago before the discovery of modern physiology, did not explicitly mention them. When I suggested to them that they could use clean, highly nutritious foods like the soy bean to sustain their health without violating their principle of non-violence, they flatly refused. They told me that if it was not written in the texts of Mahavira, it could not be accepted, because Mahavira was omniscient and knew everything better than any modern chemist. This is the ultimate tragedy of the conditioned mind. It worships the dead words of the past while remaining completely blind to the living reality of the present. Because they are constantly starving and fighting their own bodies, their eyes have lost all luster. They walk like zombies, stinking of physical filth and psychological decay, yet they are worshipped as great saints simply because they have mastered the art of self-torture. The fear of the woman is so deeply embedded in these monastic traditions that it borders on absolute insanity. A Jaina monk is strictly forbidden from touching a woman, or even sitting in a place where a woman has sat previously, under the bizarre illusion that she leaves behind a toxic spiritual vibration that can destroy his celibacy. Think of the supreme idiocy of this belief. Every single one of these monks spent 9 months floating in his mother's womb, completely showered by her physical and psychological vibrations. He was coveted by her milk, protected by her love, and his entire physical organism was built out of her flesh and bones. Yet, as an adult, he is terrified of a chair because a woman sat on it an hour ago. This extreme paranoia exists because they have thrown the woman out of their waking life, but she returns with a vengeance in their dreams. Their nights are full of sexual fantasies and suppressed desires, and because they cannot control their own unconscious minds, they project their fear onto the outer woman, calling her the gate to hell, the devil's snare, and a source of absolute impurity. This male chauvinist madness has dictated human history for millennia. In the entire history of the Jaina religion, which spans tens of thousands of years, they believe that a woman cannot attain the ultimate state of spiritual liberation, known as moksha, from a female body. They claim that a woman's body is intrinsically defective, bound to biological limitations, and that her only spiritual goal should be to live a life of submission, so that in her next reincarnation she may be rewarded with a male body. Only then can she begin the real work of self-realization. There was, however, one magnificent exception to this rule, a rare, courageous rebel named Malibhai. She was a woman of extraordinary intelligence, charisma, and spiritual power. She simply laughed at the male priesthood and declared that consciousness is neither male nor female, that the body is merely a temporary garment left behind on the funeral pyre, and that her innermost soul was absolutely free. She fulfilled every single rigorous requirement to achieve the ultimate status of a Tirthankara, the highest spiritual master. The priesthood was compelled by the sheer weight of her presence to acknowledge her attainment. But look at the cunning trick they played after her death. The moment her physical body died and could no longer speak, the male priests changed her name in all the official records. Mallibhai, which designates a woman, was altered to Malinath, which designates a man. They commissioned sculptors to carve statues of her with distinct male features, completely erasing her womanhood from the temples. Today, if you walk into any Jaina temple, you will see 24 identical statues of male masters, and the priests will proudly tell you that no woman has ever reached the ultimate height of spirituality. When I discovered this absolute historical forgery, I went to their most beautiful temples and confronted the head priests. I asked them directly, "Why are you lying to humanity? Why have you turned a great female rebel into a false male statue?" They became terrified of my questions and eventually closed the doors of their temples to me, because the orthodox mind cannot tolerate the sharp light of truth. It would rather protect a 25-century-old lie than admit its own deep-seated fear of the feminine soul. This toxic pattern of sexual repression and psychological self-destruction was vividly displayed in the modern era through the life of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi was deeply influenced by these ancient monastic ideas of celibacy and self-purification. In his ashram, love was treated as a crime. If a married couple who had joined his community was caught simply holding hands or showing natural affection, Gandhi would immediately go on a long, punishing fast to purify himself, claiming that their behavior was a reflection of his own inner impurity. This was a highly sophisticated, dangerous game of the ego. By torturing his own body through fasting, he forced the entire community to feel a crushing sense of guilt, using his self-inflicted pain as an emotional weapon to control others. Because he ate nutritious food and cared for his physical health, his vital sexual energy remained fully alive despite his decades of fierce mental repression. In the final years of his life, when his conscious control began to crack under the immense weight of nature, he began a secret experiment, sleeping naked with a 20-year-old girl to test his celibacy. His close disciples were horrified and suppressed the news from the public to protect his status as a Mahatma. They could not understand that nature cannot be defeated by any artificial vow. What is repressed will always find a way to manifest, often in the most distorted and bizarre forms. All the major religions have built vast, wealthy empires by exploiting this inner split within you. They make you feel fundamentally guilty about your natural body, your natural desires, and your natural joy, and then they offer themselves as the only cure for the very sickness they have created. Look at the Christian Trinity: God the Father, Jesus the Son, and the Holy Ghost. It is an exclusively male club. They could not even allow a single woman into the ultimate hierarchy of heaven. Without a mother, a son is miraculously born, completely violating the beautiful organic laws of nature. They claim that Mary gave birth while remaining a virgin under the influence of an invisible ghost. No sane, rational mind can believe such a primitive fiction. By turning Jesus into a supernatural entity born of a virgin, they completely cut him off from the rest of humanity, making it impossible for you to realize that you carry the exact same potential for awakening within your own consciousness. They create an unbridgeable gulf between the divine and the human, forcing you to remain a lifelong beggar, dependent on the mercy of the Church and its priests. The entire structure of Christianity is based not on the living intelligence of Christ, but on the macabre glorification of his death. It is not Christianity, it is Crossianity. It is a religion centered entirely around a crude wooden instrument of execution. If there had been no crucifixion, nobody would have remembered the name of Jesus. He would have vanished into history as just another eccentric passionate young man speaking in the villages of Judea. Jesus himself was deeply caught in a megalomaniacal delusion, a fanatic obsession with his own messiahhood. He truly believed that by forcing a dramatic confrontation with the Roman authorities and the Jewish priesthood, he could compel God to perform a spectacular miracle on the cross to save him. He was pulled towards his own execution like a magnet, driven by a deeply hidden, unconscious suicidal urge. When he was finally nailed to the post and realized that the sky remained completely silent, that no legions of angels were descending to rescue him, his entire dream shattered. In that moment of absolute despair, he cried out to the empty heavens, "Why have you forsaken me?" It was a heartbreaking realization that his beliefs were nothing but a massive, beautiful hallucination. The truth behind the story of the resurrection is far more terrestrial and human than the church is willing to admit. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, was an educated, highly sophisticated man who had absolutely no interest in crucifying a harmless, hot-blooded young preacher. He openly told the high priest of the Jews that he found no crime in Jesus, but the Orthodox masses were screaming for blood. To prevent a massive political riot, Pilate entered into a secret conspiracy with a few wealthy, influential followers of Jesus. The execution was intentionally scheduled for late Friday afternoon, just a few hours before the commencement of the Jewish Sabbath. According to rigid Jewish law, all work and public activities had to cease completely at sunset on Friday, and no bodies could be left hanging on the cross during the Sabbath. While the typical Jewish method of crucifixion was a slow, agonizing process that took anywhere from 36 to 60 hours for a person to die from blood loss and exhaustion, Jesus was taken down from the cross after only 6 hours. He had merely lost a small amount of blood and fainted from the intense pain. He was perfectly alive. His body was quickly removed by his conspirators and placed inside a private, spacious cave with a massive rock blocking the entrance. In the quiet darkness of the night, when the Roman soldiers and the Jewish priests were asleep, his wounds were treated with ancient, highly effective herbal balms, and he was secretly escorted out of Jerusalem. When the masses returned on Sunday morning, they found the tomb empty and immediately created the grand myth of the resurrection. But Jesus had finally learned his lesson. He realized the absolute danger of religious fanaticism, dropped his claims of being the only begotten Son of God, and quietly escaped to the east. He traveled along the ancient silk routes and settled in the peaceful, breathtaking valley of Kashmir, where he lived to the ripe old age of 112 years. He lived as a simple, wise shepherd, known to the locals as Joshua. His physical grave stands today in a small, quiet village called Pahalgam, which literally translates to the village of the shepherd. It sits right beside the ancient grave of Moses. Yet the Christian Church completely ignores its existence because to acknowledge the factual reality of his long life and natural death would instantly collapse the entire multi-billion-dollar empire built on the illusion of his physical resurrection. His most advanced, intelligent disciple Thomas followed him to India and spent decades mastering the profound yogic sciences of breathing and physical purification. Thomas learned the rare art of stopping his breath and heartbeat through deep conscious relaxation, a state known in Eastern mysticism as samadhi. When you learn to stop your breath voluntarily, the cellular deterioration of the body completely ceases, allowing it to remain perfectly preserved for centuries. Thomas traveled to South India and established the oldest Christian community in the world, long before the Vatican or the institutionalized popes ever existed. His physical body is still preserved in a church in Goa, completely intact after 2000 years, without the use of any artificial chemicals or mummification techniques. Science is entirely at a loss to explain this phenomenon because it operates on a completely different set of natural laws that modern medicine has not yet comprehended. True religion is not a violation of nature. It is the ultimate fulfillment of nature's hidden potential. Nature never changes its rules for anyone. It is completely impartial, fair, and indifferent to your theological labels. It does not care whether you call yourself a Christian, a Jew, a Hindu, or a Buddhist. If you jump from a cliff, gravity will pull you down with the exact same velocity. The stream flows towards the ocean following the law of least resistance, and the sun shines on the good and the bad alike. The entire search for miracles is a manifestation of human egoism, an attempt to prove that you are special, supernatural, and above the grand design of existence. A true master never attempts to perform miracles or violate the laws of physics. His unique miracle is that he lives in absolute perfect harmony with nature. When it is morning, he wakes up with the sun. When it is evening, he rests with the stars. If pain comes, he watches it. If pleasure comes, he enjoys it without attachment. He doesn't fight the current of life. He has completely dissolved his individual ego into the universal stream of let go. This absolute agreement with existence creates the only real miracle, a life of unshakable peace, love, and laughter. You are completely stuck in your life because you are constantly fighting against this natural flow, trying to live up to the impossible, artificial standards of dead saints. You have been poisoned by an education that praises psychological slavery and rewards conformity. Your subconscious mind is a vast battlefield of repressed desires, unexamined fears, and toxic guilt. To cleanse this deep-seated stagnation, you do not need a savior to wash away your sins. You need the bright, uncompromising light of your own conscious awareness. You must look directly at your repressions without judgment, without condemnation, and without fear. The moment you face your hidden darkness with absolute clarity, it loses its power over you. The ghosts of your childhood conditioning will simply evaporate in the presence of your meditation. Let go of the heavy luggage of the past. Stop dreaming about a fictional paradise in the future and bring your entire vital energy into this pristine, immediate moment here now. Listen to the silence that surrounds you. Feel the subtle pulsation of life within your own body and realize that you are already whole, perfect, and infinitely blessed. There is nowhere to go, nothing to achieve, and nobody to follow. Just be your own authentic self. Allow your unique intelligence to blossom naturally, and let the river of your existence flow freely into the vast, shoreless ocean of universal consciousness right now in this very space. Take a deep breath right now. Ground yourself completely in this pristine, silent space of meditation. Abandon all your old fears and allow your beautiful soul to dance wildly with the infinite, creative energy of existence that is vibrating all around us. This vibrant energy is also deeply threatened by another immense illness that plagues the human consciousness, an illness far more dangerous than any physical disease. And that is the will to power. If you feel completely stuck and stagnant, you must look into how this cancer of the soul operates within your society. The will to power is a profound psychological sickness that arises when an individual feels completely hollow, empty, and powerless within himself. Because he cannot find his true being, because he is terrified of his own inner vacuum, he seeks to dominate others, to convince himself that he is somebody significant. The easiest, most unintelligent manifestation of this sickness is politics. Politics requires absolutely no intelligence, no awareness, and no moral integrity. all it requires is a cunning ability to manipulate the lower instincts of the masses, to sell them beautiful, false hopes that can never be fulfilled, and to ride on their ignorance into positions of power. I have no personal grudge against politicians, because I am not in any competition with them. But I am absolutely against the disease of power itself. Lord Acton once remarked that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But he did not understand the deeper hidden truth. Power does not corrupt a clean man. It is the corrupted, empty individual who is irresistibly drawn towards power. The seeds of corruption are already fully alive within him, but they remain hidden while he is powerless. The moment he attains authority, his false mask drops away, and his inner egoist stands revealed in all its naked ugliness. Once a politician tastes power, he can never willingly give it up, because stepping down from authority means facing the agonizing reality of his own inner impotence once again. He needs a vast crowd of submissive subjects underneath his thumb to constantly validate his fictitious sense of specialness. This power trip is not confined to the domain of mundane politics. It is the exact same game played by your traditional religious saviors, messiahs, avatars, and tirthankaras. They use a more refined, polished, and spiritualized language, which makes their will to power far more difficult to detect. When Krishna demands that Arjuna abandon everything else and surrender completely at his feet for salvation, what is that if not an absolute power trip? When Muhammad declares that he is the final messenger of God, and that after him the doors of divine revelation are closed forever, he is attempting to dominate the future, ensuring that no human being can ever transcend his authority. When Gautam Buddha proclaims that he is the highest awakened entity in the past, present, and future, and that no one can ever surpass his spiritual realization, he is playing the same ego game, wrapped in the beautiful garb of enlightenment. They tell the masses to be humble, to drop their egos, and to become completely submissive, while they themselves claim a monopoly on ultimate absolute truth. This rigid, egoistic claim to finality is a direct denial of the ever-evolving, infinite nature of existence. Evolution does not stop with any prophet or messiah. Time does not come to a full stop for any scripture. All these ancient systems were created long before the birth of modern scientific inquiry, long before human intelligence began to scratch the surface of objective reality. Yet they close the doors to further discovery freeze framing human consciousness in a dark cage of ancient ignorance. To preserve their vested interests, the priests and politicians have always glorified poverty, misery, and submissiveness, because a wealthy, intelligent, and independent individual can never be enslaved. They have conditioned you to believe that poverty is a spiritual virtue, a sacred state of simplicity that is pleasing to God. This is nothing but a highly successful, sophisticated psychological drug designed to keep the poor submissive, preventing them from ever questioning the systemic exploitation that keeps them in chains. Look at how Jesus consoles the masses by saying that the poor are blessed because they shall inherit the kingdom of God, and that it is easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. This is an absolute contradiction. If the kingdom of God is a wonderful place of absolute joy and reward, then poverty in this life is not a blessing. It is an artificial curse that you are being forced to accept as a ticket for a fictional afterlife. This glorification of poverty is a crime against humanity. Poverty is not a virtue. It is a deep sociological disease, the source of all crime, violence, and human degradation. It needs to be completely destroyed, not worshipped. Only a deeply scientific, rational mind can create the technology and wealth necessary to make this earth a paradise for everyone. But all your religions have continuously fought against every single progressive scientific step because they thrive on human misery. The people who visit my communes are often profoundly shocked and puzzled when they see my sannyasins leading such a rich, luxurious life. They come with their minds completely stuffed with the ancient images of Eastern ascetics, starving hermits, and self-torturing saints. And when they see people laughing, dancing, eating delicious food, and living in comfortable modern homes, they ask, "Why do you live such a luxurious life?" They do not understand that existence itself is intrinsically luxurious. Look at the absolute abundance of nature. It does not produce just one single type of flower. It produces millions of colorful, fragrant blossoms. It does not save its energy. It overflows with an infinite, magnificent wastefulness. Stars are born and die in millions across the fathomless universe. Existence is not a poor, miserly beggar. It is a wealthy, celebrating king. Poverty is entirely a human invention, a byproduct of your psychological repression and social stupidity. I am not an ascetic, and I am absolutely against the glorification of suffering. People like Mahatma Gandhi are directly responsible for the preservation of poverty in the world. If you visit Gandhi's ashram today, you will find a collective monument to human masochism. He forced his followers to eat the bitterest leaves of the neem tree, ground into a tasteless, nauseating sauce, under the absurd religious belief that enjoying the taste of food is a spiritual sin. He banned the use of simple mosquito nets in a hot, swampy region infested with malaria, claiming that a mosquito net is an unnecessary luxury that a poor man cannot afford. Instead, he forced everyone to rub toxic kerosene oil over their faces and hands to keep the insects away, completely ignoring the fact that the pungent smell made it utterly impossible for anyone to sleep. This is not spiritual discipline. It is an insane, perverted delight in self-inflicted torture, and because he tortured himself so successfully, the mediocre mob worshipped him as a great Mahatma. All these ancient religious traditions have found incredibly clever ways to explain away human suffering, so that the status quo remains completely undisturbed. The Indian religions created the elaborate theory of karma, telling the poor man that he is starving today because of the evil actions he committed in a past life, and that his only hope is to accept his misery silently so that his soul may be purified for the next reincarnation. This absolute nonsense reached its most logical, monstrous conclusion through a specific Jaina sect known as the Therapant, led by their modern Pope Acharya Tulsi. They believe that if a human being is drowning in a deep river, shouting frantically for help, you must simply walk past him and do absolutely nothing to save his life. Their logic is flawlessly idiotic. They claim that the man is drowning because his past karma demands this specific punishment from existence. And if you interfere by pulling him out of the water, you are disrupting the cosmic law of justice. You will force him to fall into another river in his next life to complete his punishment. And more importantly, if that saved man commits a murder tomorrow, you will be spiritually responsible for all his future crimes. This is the ultimate peak of religious madness, where absolute cold-heartedness and cruelty are packaged as supreme spiritual wisdom. When you live in a society that has been deeply conditioned by these poisonous anti-life philosophies for thousands of years, you naturally become completely stuck and split within yourself. You lose your innate capacity for simple, uncaused joy. The people who come to my commune from the outer world are so deeply embedded in their misery that when they see thousands of my sannyasins singing, dancing, hugging each other, and radiating an immense aura of happiness, their minds are totally incapable of understanding it. They cannot accept that happiness can exist without any external reason, because in their world you are only allowed to be happy when you achieve some competitive goal, win a lottery, or acquire a new possession. Because they see a profound joy that does not fit into their narrow, miserable formulas, they immediately create defensive psychological explanations. They go back to their newspapers and report that my people must be brainwashed, hypnotized, or drugged into a false state of euphoria. They do not know what true hypnosis or brainwashing actually is. A hypnotized person does not radiate life, spontaneity, and creative intelligence. He walks like a rigid, mechanical zombie, completely dependent on the commands of his master. A person under the influence of chemical drugs experiences a tense, forced magnification of his current mood, followed invariably by a deep, dark plunge into physical exhaustion and psychological depression. But the happiness that exists within my sannyasins is perfectly relaxed, light, and enduring. It needs no external cause, because joy is the very nature of an undivided, unconditioned consciousness. Unhappiness requires specific reasons. You need an illness, a failure, a betrayal, or an inner conflict to be miserable. But to be happy requires absolutely nothing, because happiness is simply the natural rhythm of life when it is free from the heavy armor of the past. It is your natural birthright. But you have been so thoroughly trained in the art of suffering that simple health appears to you as a dangerous, abnormal phenomenon that must be explained away through labels like brainwashing. In ancient India, the search for intense experiences went to such extreme limits that people completely desensitized their nervous systems through the constant use of powerful poisons. There are ascetics today who can drink raw alcohol or smoke massive quantities of marijuana without showing any physical effect, because their bodies have become completely deadened. When ordinary substances fail to give them a high, they keep lethal cobra snakes with them, allowing the snake to bite them directly on the tongue just to experience a faint, momentary flash of mental stimulation. This is a terrifying illustration of what happens when you repress your natural senses and cut yourself off from the simple, exquisite poetry of everyday life. You become so dead inside that you require a lethal poison just to feel a spark of existence. I want you to step completely out of this deadness. I want you to realize that you do not need cobras. You do not need artificial drugs, and you do not need the empty promises of a future heaven to feel the magnificent ecstasy of being alive here now. This deep psychological deadness has also corrupted the great political and economic ideologies of the modern age, specifically the phenomenon of Marxian communism. Many people think that communism is a compassionate movement designed to eliminate the suffering of the poor, but I tell you that it is built on the exact same foundation of materialism and egoism as the old religions. Karl Marx was a highly intelligent, intellectual man, but he was a total bookworm who spent his entire life buried in the library of the British Museum, smoking cigarettes and reading dry academic texts, until he would fall completely unconscious and have to be carried to the hospital on a stretcher. He never spent a single moment of his life sitting in deep silence, meditating, or exploring the inner, subjective dimensions of his own consciousness. His entire ideology was born not out of compassion for the working class, but out of a fierce, deep-seated Jewish jealousy towards the rich. Marx was born into a long lineage of poverty, and to be poor and Jewish in a world where other Jews are accumulating massive wealth is a highly volatile, psychologically agonizing situation. His ideology does not focus on making the poor wealthy. It focuses entirely on destroying the rich and distributing their wealth. In the Soviet Union, in China, and across the communist world, they succeeded in slaughtering millions of wealthy individuals, but they did not eliminate poverty. They simply distributed the poverty equally among the masses. Because there is no longer anyone wealthy to compare yourself with, the jealousy disappears, and the poor are falsely satisfied with their universal stagnation. Marx declared that human consciousness is nothing but an epiphenomenon, a mere byproduct of material conditions, and that when the physical body dies, nothing remains. This brutal, unscientific, materialist view completely strips humanity of its soul, turning individuals into mere cogs in a massive state machine. Because these totalitarian regimes believed that human beings are nothing but matter, they felt absolutely no prick of conscience when they eliminated millions of citizens to enforce their political control. It was merely a mechanical rearrangement of physical parts. I am completely against this inhuman, dictatorial communism that destroys individual freedom. But I have my own vision of a true, organic communism. To me, real communism can only happen as the ultimate, highest flowering of a fully developed capitalistic society. Capitalism is the first economic system in the history of the world that does not merely rob or exploit people, but uses human intelligence, science, and technology to actively create new wealth. Before capitalism, wealth was merely stolen by kings and feudal lords from the poor. It was a criminal accumulation. But capitalism creates wealth out of the fertile soil of human creativity. And when a society becomes so immensely wealthy that capital loses its competitive scarcity, when wealth reaches a saturation point, it naturally begins to overflow and spread to every single individual in the community. True communism is not a violent revolt against wealth. It is the natural fulfillment of capitalism happening in a space of absolute democracy, freedom of expression, and profound respect for the individual soul. The modern political state is terrified of this vision because it operates entirely on the principle of numbers and mob manipulation. They want a massive, uniform crowd of identical slaves because unique individuals can never be transformed into predictable puppets. Communism and democracy as practiced today are both guilty of trying to enforce an artificial equality upon humanity. I tell you that no two human beings are equal. And this is not a statement of higher or lower, but a statement of absolute, unique individuality. A rose is not equal to a lotus. A blade of grass is not equal to a grand cedar tree. And a distant star is not equal to the sun. There is no comparison because comparison can only exist between two things that are identical. Each individual is a completely fresh, unrepeatable masterpiece of nature. When you try to make everyone equal, you are simply trying to turn a beautiful garden of diverse flowers into a flat, monotonous desert of concrete. True intelligence respects this uniqueness. And a true commune is a space where this individual flowering is supported with unconditional love and absolute freedom. You are completely stuck in your life because you have allowed the gross politicians and the subtle priests to crush this unique individuality, forcing you to participate in their competitive games of wealth, status, and power. You are constantly running after their false carrots, wasting your vital life force in an endless race that leads only to the graveyard. Your subconscious mind has become a dark, cluttered archive of borrowed concepts, political conditionings, and religious guilts. To cleanse this deep-seated paralysis, you must completely drop the will to power and turn your entire attention inwards. You do not need to dominate others. You need to discover your own sovereign being. True richness is not measured by the balance in your bank account, but by the depth of your silence, the intensity of your love, and the abundance of your inner joy. Step completely out of the mechanical crowd. Look directly at your subconscious programming without any judgment, and let the light of your detached observation dissolve every single chain of your conditioning. There is no need to wait for a distant paradise or to torture your physical body in the hope of a future reward. Life is happening right now, in this very breath, overflowing with an incredible, uncaused beauty that is waiting to be experienced. Drop the false armor of equality. Stop comparing your path with anyone else's, and allow your authentic individual life to unfold naturally. Sit in utter stillness. Allow your thoughts to pass away like clouds in an empty sky, and let your consciousness sink into the fathomless, ecstatic abyss of your own subjectivity. Take a deep, relaxed breath right now. Melt completely into the silent vibration of this pristine space. Abandon all your old worries and feel the magnificent, creative current of existence, washing your soul clean of all the heavy luggage of the past. You are already whole, you are already complete, and you are already infinitely free in this immediate moment. Just allow this profound inner silence to grow much deeper within your living heart, with every single passing heartbeat. Feel the exquisite presence of your own timeless soul, and let the great golden river of your unique individual life flow beautifully without any resistance or hesitation right now. Here now in this sacred, pristine temple of ultimate spiritual awakening. This awakening cannot happen through a mind that remains tethered to the traditional ideals of obedience, because obedience is nothing but a highly coordinated strategy of the priest and the politician to keep you in perpetual mental slavery. All old religions praise obedience as one of the highest spiritual virtues, but I tell you that obedience is a poison that completely paralyzes human intelligence. To be authentically religious, you must be an absolute rebel. Rebellion is the very core of a genuine religious consciousness. Look at the figures that the old traditions worship as incarnations of the divine, and you will see the terrifying nature of what they call morality. Consider the story of Parasurama, whom the Hindus worship as a partial incarnation of God. His father, a high priest full of suspicion and marital jealousy, ordered him to cut off his own mother's head while she was fast asleep. Parasurama, out of blind, uncritical obedience, took his axe and decapitated his mother without even asking why. In the eyes of traditional religion, this monstrous act of violence is glorified as a supreme example of devotion to the parents. This is not morality. It is a clinical manifestation of a deeply sick, submissive mind. The story goes even further into the dark corridors of violence. Parasurama's father, fueled by a deep political conflict between the priestly class and the warrior class, then ordered his son to become a professional mass murderer. He commanded him to destroy all the warriors and politicians on the face of the earth, and the scriptures proudly claim that he single-handedly wiped out the entire ruling class 36 times. If you look at the sheer numbers of people slaughtered by this so-called incarnation of God, he surpasses the brutality of the most ruthless conquerors and tyrants in human history combined. Yet, because his violence served the vested interests of the priestly class, the Brahmins awarded him the status of an avatara. If such a bloodthirsty entity is considered an incarnation of the divine, then what is left for the incarnation of the devil? I refuse to be included in such a company. There is a pristine, silent beauty in being a simple, ordinary human being, entirely free from these grand, violent fictions of the past. Look at another deeply revered incarnation, Rama, who is worshipped by millions across India as the ultimate ideal of human conduct. His entire life was dictated by a pathetic submission to the political and personal whims of the past. His father, an old man infatuated with his youngest, most beautiful wife, exiled Rama into the wild forest for 14 years without any crime or justification, just to ensure that the young queen's son could inherit the throne. Rama accepted this absolute injustice without a single word of protest, and the traditions praise his blind obedience as the highest standard of virtue. His wife, Sita, followed him into the wilderness like a helpless shadow. Having no independent soul or individual identity of her own, when she was eventually abducted by a rival king, Ravana, Rama fought a brutal war for 3 years to recover her. But the moment she was brought back to him, his true political face stood revealed. Instead of embracing his traumatized wife with love and compassion, Rama looked at her and uttered words that are so deeply insulting to human dignity that they reveal the third-rate mind of a politician. He told her plainly that he did not fight the war out of any love for her, but solely to protect his own prestige and the honor of his lineage. He told her that he could easily acquire thousands of women like her, and before he could ever accept her back into his palace, she had to prove her chastity by passing through a physical fire test. Think of the monstrous double standards embedded in this myth. The woman is forced to walk through a burning fire to prove her purity, while the man remains completely unquestioned about his own conduct during those 3 years of separation. Fire has absolutely nothing to do with human morality or marital faithfulness. It follows its own physical laws of combustion. If you put your hand into a burning candle, it will burn regardless of whether you are speaking the truth or a lie, because nature is completely indifferent to your moral concept. Yet Sita passed through the fire, and even after that unscientific, cruel test, Rama abandoned her in the forest when he discovered that his political subjects were still gossiping about her reputation. He sacrificed an innocent, loving woman at the altar of his political power, and this third-rate politician is worshipped as a perfect God. The traditional madness reaches its absolute peak with Krishna, whom the Hindus worship as the perfect total incarnation of the divine, a Purnavatara. When you look at his actual life beneath the thick layers of romantic and religious mythology, you find a highly cunning, political, and manipulative character. The scriptures proudly state that Krishna had 16,000 wives, and most of these women were not married through any conventional, mutual, social arrangement. They were forcibly stolen and taken away from other men, from their families and husbands, through raw physical power. If a man in the modern era accumulates hundreds of women by force, he is recognized as a dangerous criminal. But because Krishna wraps his behavior in a cosmic spiritual philosophy, millions of people bow down before his statues. They have been so thoroughly brainwashed by tradition that they cannot see the blatant, ugly exploitation hidden right in front of their eyes. They are stuck in their lives because they are trying to model their morality after these deeply perverted, power-hungry fictions. To maintain this grand illusion of superiority, these ancient religious figures had to rely constantly on the invention of supernatural miracles, because the mediocre human mind is always anxious to cling to someone who can violate the laws of nature. But I tell you with absolute certainty that miracles have never happened. Nature never breaks its own organic rules for anyone. Whether you call yourself a messiah, a prophet, or a king, the entire business of miracles is a cheap, coordinated deception designed to befool the ignorant masses. I remember a friend of mine, a Mohammedan Sufi preacher who lived in Calcutta before the partition of India, who became world famous for performing a spectacular miracle at a busy railway station. He entered a packed express train without a ticket, and when the ticket collector respectfully asked for his permit, the preacher grew furious, claiming that a holy man should never be subjected to such mundane rules. The ticket collector remained adamant and dragged him off the train onto the platform. The preacher stood on the platform, closed his eyes, and declared that the train would not move an inch until the ticket collector apologized. The guard showed the green flag, the station master blew the whistle, the driver pushed the levers, but the engine completely failed to move. A massive crowd gathered around the holy man, screaming that the train was paralyzed because a great saint had been insulted. The furious passengers forced the poor ticket collector to fall at the preacher's feet, beg for forgiveness, and promise that no holy man would ever be asked for a ticket again. The preacher opened his eyes, gave his blessing, and the train immediately started moving. My friend later laughed and confessed to me that the entire miracle was a simple financial arrangement. The driver, the engineer, and the guard had all been heavily bribed beforehand to ensure the train stayed static. This is the reality behind all your religious miracles. They are nothing but cheap tricks played on a crowd that is desperate to believe in the supernatural because their own daily life is so utterly empty and meaningless. True religion has absolutely nothing to do with these external, miraculous shows. It is the silent art of turning your awareness inwards to look at your own subjectivity. But this inward turning is intensely difficult because your subconscious mind is heavily guarded by the ghosts of your past conditioning. You are terrified of your own aloneness, and you are constantly seeking a master or a savior to hold your hand and carry your responsibilities. But a real spiritual master never allows you to depend on him. He is not a leader, and he doesn't want followers. He acts simply as a mirror so that you can see your own hidden reality clearly. The mirror doesn't do anything, it simply reflects what is in front of it because that is its essential nature. In the presence of a true master, your hidden wounds, your suppressed desires, and your subtle hypocrisies are brought into the sharp light of awareness. And this process can be deeply painful to your ego. When the ego is exposed, it often turns into vicious anger and betrayal. I have experienced this throughout my entire life. For many years, a sannyasin named Shiva served as my personal bodyguard, sitting by my side day and night, protecting my physical body with absolute dedication. But the moment he dropped sannyas and went back to the outer world, his repressed ego flared up with a vengeance. He began writing highly toxic, sensational articles for prominent German magazines, spreading outright lies and malicious fabrications about me and the commune. He spent 10 years sitting right next to me in silence. Yet it took him a decade to suddenly discover that everything was wrong. The truth is, his writing was not an attack on me, but a desperate, pathetic attempt to heal the immense wound he had inflicted upon his own soul. He had to convince himself that I was a fraud just to justify his decision to run away from the intense fire of self-exploration. Yet, if Shiva were to return tomorrow and ask to be my bodyguard again, I would welcome him with open arms, because my trust is completely unconditional. It does not depend on his behavior, because true trust is an overflowing quality of my own being, not a business contract based on loyalty. This unconditional trust is completely missing from the old religions, because their entire survival depends on keeping you fragmented, guilty, and deeply terrified of your own nature. They have built their grand cathedrals and wealthy churches by misinterpreting the very origin of human life. Look at the biblical story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. What was their original sin? Why were they so brutally expelled from paradise by a jealous, angry God? Their only crime was that they disobeyed an arbitrary command and ate the fruit from two specific trees, the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Think about the nature of a creator who explicitly forbids his own children from becoming wise, conscious, and eternal. Such an entity is not a loving father. He is a fierce enemy of human intelligence who wants his creations to remain naked, ignorant, and completely dependent on his absolute authority like animals. The devil, in the form of a subtle serpent, gave the most logical, compassionate advice possible. He told Eve that God was simply jealous because if they ate the fruit of knowledge, they would become equal to the divine. I tell you that the serpent was the first true benefactor of humanity, because without that original act of sacred disobedience, there would be no human history, no science, no philosophy, and no conscious evolution. You would still be swinging from the branches of trees in the jungle, completely devoid of the magnificent architecture of human civilization. Knowledge is not a sin. It is the unique glory of human consciousness. To live your life with absolute intensity, to squeeze every single drop of juice from the present moment, and to explore the infinite mysteries of existence through science and logic, is the only true way to worship the universe. But the institutionalized priests are terrified of knowledge because an intelligent humanity will instantly laugh at their primitive dogmas. They have spent centuries brutally persecuting every scientist who dared to look at reality with open eyes, trying to freeze human progress to protect their holy books. For centuries, the Christian popes insisted that the earth was completely flat, simply because it was written so in their uninspired scriptures. They could not tolerate the simple geographical truth that the earth is a moving globe, because if one single statement in their holy book was proved wrong, the entire structure of their absolute infallibility would instantly collapse into dust. When Columbus wanted to sail west to find a new route to India, the religious authorities tried to stop him, warning him that he would fall off the edge of the flat earth into a dark abyss of demons. It was only through his immense rebellious courage that he risked his life, disobeyed the church, and discovered an entire new continent, proving their theology completely false. The same violence was unleashed upon Galileo, an old man of 75, who was dragged from his deathbed to the papal court because his telescope proved that the earth revolves around the sun and not vice versa. The infallible Pope forced him to kneel down and recant his scientific discoveries. But Galileo, full of an immense sense of cosmic humor, looked at the Pope and said that he would gladly change the words in his book, but the universe would not listen to his commands. The earth would still continue its majestic dance around the sun. This systemic war against human intelligence continues into the modern era, manifesting as a catastrophic resistance to the burning problems that face our planet. The earth is currently overburdened with a massive, unprecedented explosion of population, leading to widespread starvation, poverty, and human degradation. Yet, the Pope in Rome, the Orthodox Shankaracharyas in India, and the fanatical Mohammedan Imams are all in absolute uniform agreement against birth control and abortion. They declare that preventing a birth is a mortal sin against God, completely ignoring the fact that their religious interference is condemning millions of living children to a slow, agonizing death from hunger in the streets. They don't want to eliminate poverty because their entire business of public sainthood relies on the continuous existence of a miserable, suffering class of people whom they can pretend to serve. Look at Mother Teresa, who spent her entire life receiving international accolades and Nobel Prizes for her service to the orphans of Calcutta. If you introduce universal birth control and legal abortion, the orphans will completely disappear. And if there are no dying children in the gutters, who is going to give a Nobel Prize to Mother Teresa? She explicitly stated in her acceptance speech that abortion is the greatest threat to world peace, which is an absolute hilarious perversion of truth. The truth is, the population explosion is the real threat to world peace, leading directly to war, crime, and global collapse. But these missionaries need a continuous stream of starving orphans because they are the easiest raw material to convert into Christianity. They don't convert the rich or the highly educated because they cannot argue with them. They target the most vulnerable, uncultured, and desperate populations who can be bought with a piece of bread and a cheap medical miracle. I remember a hilarious conversion camp I witnessed in the central Indian state of Bastar, an isolated region populated entirely by naked, starving aboriginals. A Christian missionary was addressing a large crowd of these shivering people on a cold winter night, standing next to a burning bonfire. He had a large bucket of water by his side, and he pulled out two identical statues, one of the Hindu god Rama and one of Jesus Christ. He placed both statues into the water. Rama's statue, which was made of heavy steel, immediately sank to the bottom, while Jesus' statue, which was crafted from light balsa wood, remained floating beautifully on the surface. The missionary clapped his hands and shouted to the ignorant aboriginals that they could see with their own eyes that Rama cannot even save himself from drowning, so how can he ever save their souls? He told them that only Jesus floats, only Jesus saves, and the simple people were completely amazed, ready to accept baptism. I could not tolerate this blatant deception, so I stood up from the back of the crowd and challenged the missionary to a real fire test. I grabbed both statues, walked up to the roaring bonfire, and threw them directly into the flames. Of course, the light wooden Jesus instantly caught fire and burned into absolute ash within a few minutes, while the heavy steel Rama emerged from the coals completely intact and glowing with heat. The aboriginals were absolutely furious at the priest, realizing they had been tricked by a cheap physical gimmick. This is the ultimate reality of all your institutionalized religious dogmas. They are built on wooden fictions that cannot withstand the intense fire of scientific logic and deep meditative inquiry. You are completely stuck in your life because you are still allowing these wooden beliefs, these artificial fears and these ancient double standards to dictate your inner reality. To cleanse your subconscious mind of this historical accumulation of dirt, you must drop all your borrowed masks, step out of the submissive crowd, and claim your absolute right to be a rebel. Do not seek for a miracle from the outside, and do not place your faith in a dead Savior who could not even save his own life. Your ultimate redemption is hidden within the silent depth of your own subjectivity. Let go of the heavy luggage of your past conditioning right now. Ground your awareness in this pristine here now and allow your unique individual intelligence to blossom beautifully in this space. This spiritual awakening demands that you confront the most terrifying yet most beautiful reality of human existence, and that is your absolute, pristine aloneness. You are completely stuck in your life because you are running away from this inner void, covering it with relationships, crowds, ambitions, and belief systems. But the void cannot be filled by anything external. It can only be understood through deep, silent meditation. Look at your deep-seated panic whenever you are left completely alone with yourself. If you are put into a room in absolute isolation for just 21 days, completely disconnected from your newspapers, your television, your radio, your family, and your social circles, you will go completely insane. Within 3 weeks, the earth beneath your feet will begin to disappear. A profound trembling will arise from your unconscious, and all your false masks will shatter into pieces. This happens because your entire sense of sanity and identity is borrowed from the crowd surrounding you. You are dependent on others to tell you who you are, and the moment the audience is removed, you fall into a terrifying psychological vacuum. To avoid this inner vacuum, humanity has created a massive network of mindless distractions and entertainment. Look at the utter idiocy of a modern sports stadium. Millions of grown human beings gather to watch a few individuals kick a leather ball across a white line, screaming and shouting as if something of ultimate cosmic significance is taking place. Why is there such a desperate addiction to these trivial games? It is not because of any love for the sport. It is a desperate, unconscious strategy to escape from your own self, to forget for a few hours that you are completely alone and empty inside. You melt yourself into the mechanical mob, screaming with the crowd, because the collective noise drowns out the quiet, haunting voice of your own inner isolation. You will watch any rotten movie, read any trashy novel, or participate in any senseless gossip, just to keep your mind occupied, avoiding the pristine confrontation with your own subjectivity. Belief is nothing but a beautiful, decorative blanket thrown over these hidden wounds of your consciousness. But under the flowers, the pus continues to gather. A true master does not offer you a new belief to cover your holes. He ruthlessly tears away all your blankets so that you can look directly into your own empty spaces. This is the fundamental difference between blind faith in a Messiah and authentic trust in a spiritual master. A Messiah capitalizes on your psychological sickness, offering you a cheap cover for your inner vacuum by demanding your total submission. He tells you that you are a helpless sinner, and if you simply believe in His divine authority without any doubt, He will redeem your soul and carry your burdens. This is a highly coordinated mutual conspiracy. You satisfy the Messiah's megalomaniacal need for a massive following to prove his own sanity, and he satisfies your childish desire for a protective father figure so that you can avoid using your own critical intelligence. This dynamic is ingrained in your psychological structure from your earliest childhood, where your parents and priests systematically trained you to be a submissive follower, turning your unique intelligence into a paralyzed instrument of conformity. This blind enforcement of faith was the exact cause of the ultimate tragedy surrounding Jesus and his disciples. Look closely at the character of Judas Iscariot, who has been universally condemned by the Christian world for 2000 years as the ultimate personification of evil. I tell you that Judas was not an enemy of Jesus. He was the most educated, cultured, and intellectually sophisticated individual among all the 12 apostles. The remaining 11 disciples were simple, uneducated fishermen, woodcutters, and laborers who were easily hypnotized by Jesus' charismatic style and readily accepted his claims of being the only begotten Son of God without asking any difficult questions. They were delighted to be recognized as elite apostles of the divine, which gave an immense, subtle satisfaction to their low-class egos. But Judas, because of his high intelligence, was constantly tormented by deep, rational doubts. He wanted to trust, but he needed a solid, experiential ground for his realization, which Jesus continuously failed to provide. Jesus simply pushed his intellect away, demanding blind, uncritical faith, which only reinforced Judas's inner frustration. Driven by this profound intellectual desperation, Judas did not deliver Jesus to the Roman authorities out of any petty greed for 30 pieces of silver. That is a cheap, superficial story invented by the subsequent priests. Judas entered into that dark arrangement because it was the only ultimate method left to force a rational proof of Jesus' divinity. His doubt reasoned that if Jesus was truly the omnipotent Son of the living God, the crucifixion would provide the perfect, undeniable stage for a spectacular cosmic miracle. God would surely descend from heaven to rescue His only Son, proving His Messiahhood to the entire skeptical world once and for all, and eliminating all of Judas's agonizing doubts forever. But when the crucifixion took place and the heavens remained completely silent, when Jesus died on the cross like an ordinary, vulnerable man crying out in absolute despair, Judas's entire world collapsed into dust. He realized that his master had no supernatural powers, that it was all a beautiful, tragic hallucination, and his grief and repentance were so overwhelming that within 24 hours he went into the forest and hanged himself. His suicide was a profound manifestation of his deep love and frustration. Yet the Church has completely defamed him to protect the fiction of their own blind faith. I do not want you to duplicate this tragedy by placing a blind, emotional faith in me. I am an ordinary man, and I am cutting the very root of your believing mechanism by insisting on my absolute ordinariness. I don't give you any dogmas, and I don't fulfill any of your childish fantasies. True trust is not blind. It is a highly scientific, experiential phenomenon that operates in two distinct stages. The first stage is a hypothetical trust, where you accept my insights not as an unalterable answer, but as a valid hypothesis to be actively tested in the laboratory of your own meditation. When a scientist begins an experiment, he takes a hypothesis for granted just to initiate the research, keeping his mind fully open to whether it succeeds or fails. If you sit in silent observation, watching your thoughts pass away like clouds, you will eventually taste a drop of that ultimate nectar that I am talking about. The moment you experience that inner silence on your own tongue, the trust moves from a hypothesis into an absolute existential reality. You no longer need to believe in me because you know the truth firsthand, and in that grand realization, the artificial difference between the master and the disciple completely disappears into a single flame of universal consciousness. This natural realization is completely blocked because your society has conditioned you to celebrate a profound hypocrisy called unselfishness and service. All your old religions tell you that to be spiritual, you must sacrifice your own needs, ignore your own desires, and spend your life serving humanity. I tell you that this is an absolute, unnatural distortion of reality. Selfishness is an intrinsic, highly essential part of human nature, designed by biology itself to ensure your survival and growth. A child born without absolute selfishness would not survive for a single day. He would not cry for milk when he is hungry. He would not move away from a dangerous snake, and he would simply offer his physical body as food to a hungry lion out of pure unselfishness. Selfishness is the vital life force that keeps you alive, healthy, and grounded on this earth. Unless you take absolute care of yourself first, unless you allow your own seed to blossom into a fully conscious, joyful tree, you have absolutely nothing to give to the world. The old religions have used this beautiful word service as a dirty strategy to exploit your guilt and keep humanity permanently poor, dependent, and miserable. They need a massive class of starving beggars, lonely orphans, and suffering widows, because without these broken individuals, who is going to validate their public display of sainthood? If poverty and disease are completely eliminated from the earth through science and intelligence, the entire multi-million-dollar industry of religious service will instantly go bankrupt. They do not want to cure the disease. They want to preserve the opportunity to serve, using the suffering of the poor as a spiritual ladder to climb into their fictional heavens. When you serve someone out of a sense of moral obligation, you are simply humiliating that person, reducing him to a subhuman creature to satisfy your own subtle egoism. I tell my sannyasins to throw this dirty word service into the garbage bin. If you have found a deep joy, an intense silence, and a magnificent love within your own being, you do not serve. You simply share your abundance spontaneously, with no future motive, no expectation of a reward, and with absolute gratitude towards the person who is willing to receive your gift. This absolute distortion of reality through institutionalized service is vividly captured in an ancient, profound Chinese parable. A poor man accidentally fell into a deep, unprotected water well during a crowded public festival. And because of the immense noise of dancing and singing, no one heard his desperate cries for help. After an hour of agonizing struggle, a Buddhist monk passed by the well, looked down into the dark water, and saw the man drowning. Instead of offering a hand, the monk closed his eyes, assumed a solemn expression, and told the drowning man that his misfortune was the direct result of his past life's evil actions. He told him to accept his drowning as a beautiful opportunity to fulfill his cosmic punishment, so that in his next incarnation, his soul would be born entirely clean and pure. The poor man screamed that he did not want any ancient philosophy at that terrifying moment, but the Buddhist monk simply adjusted his robes and walked away in silence, completely satisfied with his own detached holiness. A few minutes later, an old Taoist mystic stopped by the well to quench his thirst, heard the poor man weeping for help, and looked down. The Taoist shook his head in deep disappointment and told the man that his crying was completely unmanly and against the great principle of let go taught by Lao Tzu. He told him that he must accept everything that life brings with absolute relaxation, whether it is a kingdom or a watery grave, and that he should stop behaving like a frightened woman. The poor man wept that he was perfectly willing to be called a woman if the mystic would only pull him out of the water first. But the Taoist replied that his philosophy strictly prohibited any artificial interference in the natural destiny of an individual. He told him that since everyone must die eventually, whether today or tomorrow, saving his life was an exercise in pure futility, and he should use his remaining breath to sing a beautiful song of acceptance before vanishing into the deep water. Soon after the Taoist departed, a prominent Confucian scholar approached the well, and the drowning man felt a fresh spark of hope, because Confucians are known to be deeply earthbound and socially active. The man shouted up to him, quoting the texts, reminding him that Confucius explicitly commands his followers to help those in need. The scholar nodded wisely and told the man that he was absolutely right, and that his falling into the well had revealed a massive flaw in the city's infrastructure. He promised the drowning man that he would instantly initiate a nationwide political campaign to force the government to build protective stone walls around every single well in the empire, so that future generations would never suffer this tragedy. The poor man gasped that by the time his political revolution succeeded, his lungs would be full of water. But the Confucian replied that individual lives do not matter, only the collective society matters. He told the man to drop his selfish, narrow attitude and to be proud that his death was serving the greater progress of human civilization, and he marched off to address the Senate. Finally, a Christian missionary approached the well, carrying a large bag of equipment. The moment he saw the drowning man, he immediately opened his bag, pulled out a long rope, and threw it down into the dark well, shouting to the man to hold on tight. The poor man was absolutely overjoyed and cried out that Christianity must be the only true, compassionate religion on the earth. But as the missionary was pulling him up, he looked down and told the man that he was completely against the Confucian idea of building protective walls around the wells. He said that if all the wells are safely protected, no one will ever fall into them, and if no one falls into them, how will the Christian missionaries ever find the opportunity to serve humanity and save souls? He told the man that his falling into the well was a beautiful God-given opportunity for the missionary to earn a ticket to heaven, and that wells must remain completely open and dangerous so that the business of institutionalized service can continue to thrive forever. This is the true hidden face of your so-called unselfish religions. They don't want to solve your problems. They want to preserve your miseries so that they can maintain their patronizing status as public servants. They have given beautiful spiritual names to ugly commercial exploitations, and you have become completely stuck because you have accepted their code language as absolute truth. I want you to drop this entire vocabulary of service, sacrifice, and artificial unselfishness. Your primary, ultimate responsibility is not to the world, not to the poor, and not to the crowd, but to your own individual soul. You must become an absolute egoist in the truest, highest sense of the word, focusing your entire vital energy on your own inner flowering, on your own meditation, and on your own awakening. The moment you become a fully illuminated, ecstatic entity, your very being becomes a dynamic center of sharing, radiating light, love, and laughter to everyone around you without any effort or strategy. You are stuck because you are constantly trying to find a social or religious justification for your existence, trying to prove to others that you are a good, moral, and useful person according to their artificial measurements. I tell you that you do not need any justification to be alive. Your life is an end unto itself, a magnificent gift from the universe that needs no utility, value to be beautiful. A rose does not create any machinery. A lotus does not build any houses, and a singing bird does not contribute to the economic growth of the country. Yet their very existence is a supreme blessing to the cosmos. You must drop this mechanical, business-like approach to life and learn the exquisite art of being here and now, squeezing every single drop of nectar from this immediate moment without any worry about tomorrow. The unlived past is the heavy, toxic burden that creates all your psychological stagnation, making you old, irritable, and completely paralyzed. Cleanse your mind of this dead weight by living so totally in the present that nothing is left incomplete, leaving no traces on your consciousness. Look at the old people around you. See how constantly angry, bitter, and irritated they are by the simple joy of children. It is not their fault. It is the tragic cry of their unlived past. When an old man sees a child jumping, dancing, and shouting with natural ecstasy, his inner, suppressed child experiences a deep, painful wound. He remembers how his own childhood was ruthlessly crushed by his parents and priests in the name of respectability and discipline, and because he missed his own life, he cannot tolerate anyone else enjoying theirs. He wants everyone to be serious, quiet, and long-faced, just like him, trying to convert the whole world into a gloomy graveyard. I want you to completely break out of this heavy, institutionalized deadness. I want my sannyasins to remain eternally young, wild, and intensely alive, carrying the fresh innocence of a child and the profound wisdom of a master together in a beautiful, harmonious whole. Do not allow the crowd to drag you back into their serious, miserable patterns, and do not be disturbed when they try to interpret your natural joy through labels like brainwashing or madness. They are simply projecting their own deep-seated frustration onto your freedom. When they look at your smiling faces, your ecstatic dancing, and your unconditional love, it forces them to feel the absolute emptiness of their own conventional lives, which hurts their egos deeply. To protect themselves from this painful realization, they must convince themselves that your happiness is artificial, a trick played by drugs or hypnosis. Answer their skepticism not with arguments, but with an overflow of your existential joy. Pull them into your dance, share your laughter with them, and let the sheer infection of your bliss break through their thick armor of conditioning. Logic cannot convince a miserable person that joy is possible, but the living vibration of an awakened soul can trigger a sudden lion's roar within their own sleeping consciousness. The river of your life has been blocked for too long by these massive rocks of historical dirt, social manipulation, and religious guilt. You have been sitting on the shore, weeping and waiting for a dead savior to lift you across, while the living water of existence is vibrating right in front of you. Open your eyes Discard your borrowed beliefs and jump directly into the flowing current of the present moment here now. Trust your own natural instincts. Celebrate your unique individuality and let your consciousness dissolve completely into the fathomless, ecstatic abyss of your own subjectivity. There is no heaven to reach, no hell to fear, and no master to follow. You are already the ultimate sovereign of your own reality. Sit in absolute stillness right now. Watch the traffic of your mind fade away into pristine silence and feel the magnificent creative energy of the cosmos washing your soul clean of all the centuries of darkness. Let go of everything. Breathe deeply into this quiet space and let your unique individual life blossom beautifully into an eternal dance of absolute freedom. This deep inner purification cannot be achieved by turning yourself into a spiritual technician who follows a mechanical formula. True meditation is not a technique. It is a state of pristine, unattached alertness. It is the core of subjective science, a science that does not look at the objective world of matter but dives directly into the fathomless ocean of your own inner subjectivity. To help you understand this transition from the outer to the inner, I have spoken extensively about the 112 methods of meditation that have been developed by the ancient seers of the East. These 112 methods are not dogmatic beliefs. They are scientific hypotheses designed to suit every possible variation of human psychological structure. Once you find the single method that resonates with your inner chemistry, the door to reality opens instantly. And the beauty of this subjective science is that once you have reached the ultimate core of your being through one method, all the other 111 methods become perfectly simple and transparent to you because you already know the destination. To explore this inner terrain, you must first become fully aware of how your mind acts as a constant barrier to your freedom. The mind is a chronic collector of definitions, labels, and explanations. It cannot remain at ease with the mysterious, the unnameable, and the vast. Whenever you experience a moment of deep silence, a moment where the continuous traffic of your thoughts stops entirely, the mind immediately jumps in to categorize it, saying, "This is beautiful, this is mystical, or this is divine." By labeling the experience, the mind destroys its living vitality and turns it into a dead memory. You feel completely stuck in your life because you are constantly living in the graveyard of your past memories and definitions, completely missing the fresh, unrepeatable reality of the present moment here now. True meditation means stepping entirely out of this linguistic prison, allowing your consciousness to exist in a state of absolute, wordless clarity. This state of pristine clarity is often intensely difficult for the modern intellectual to comprehend, because the intellectual has been trained to value logic, argumentation, and verbal proof above living experience. I am reminded of a beautiful story from the life of Gautam Buddha concerning a blind logician who lived in a small Indian village. This blind man was an exceptionally sharp, logical individual, and he completely exhausted the patience of the village scholars through his relentless arguments against the existence of light. He would tell the people that anything that truly exists must be tangible. It must have a shape, a weight, a smell, or a sound. He would demand that they bring light to his hands so he could touch it, or hit it with a stick so he could hear its resonance, or bring its fragrance to his nose. Because light cannot be touched, smelled, heard, or tasted, the logician would laugh arrogantly and tell the villagers that they were all suffering from a massive collective hallucination, and that they had invented the fiction of light simply to prove him blind. When Gautam Buddha passed through that village with his disciples, the desperate elders brought the blind logician to him, hoping that the master's great wisdom would finally defeat his stubborn arguments. Buddha listened to the entire story with a deep, compassionate smile and told the villagers that they were completely wrong to argue with the logician. He told them that the blind man was entirely right in his position, because light cannot be proved through logical debate to someone who lacks the organ of vision. Buddha turned to his disciples and said that the logician did not need a philosopher or a spiritual lecture. He simply needed a physician to cure his eyes. Buddha left his personal royal physician in the village to treat the man's physical sight, and after 3 months of careful medical treatment, the thin layer of disease covering the man's eyes was completely removed. The logician saw the sunrise for the first time, fell at Buddha's feet in absolute gratitude, and wept, realizing that his sharp logic had kept him blind for his entire life. This is the exact relationship between medicine and meditation. Medicine is the science that cures your physical organism, removing the material obstructions that block your health, while meditation is the supreme inner medicine that cures your being, removing the psychological layers of conditioning that block your spiritual vision. You do not need to accumulate more theories, more philosophies, or more scriptures to resolve your inner paralysis. You simply need to cure your eyes through the practice of pure, detached observation. When you sit silently and begin to watch your thoughts pass across the screen of your awareness without any judgment, condensation, or choice, a miraculous transformation begins to take place. In the beginning, you will find a massive rush hour of thoughts, a continuous chaotic stream of memories, anxieties, and desires running through your mind. But if you remain completely patient, standing by the side of the road like a detached spectator, the crowd naturally begins to thin out. As your watchfulness grows sharper, the spaces between your thoughts become wider and deeper. These silent gaps are the first glimpses of your true, unconditioned soul. In those exquisite moments of absolute stillness, when no thought moves on the screen of your awareness, you taste the true nectar of godliness. It is not a belief, it is a direct, immediate experience that vibrates in the very core of your being. I have often mentioned that even a single minute of absolute silence is enough to completely transform your entire life. But to attain even 20 seconds of true, uncaused silence is one of the most difficult challenges in the world for the conditioned mind. Because the moment a gap happens, the mind immediately comes back to celebrate it, saying, "Aha, I am silent." And by making that very statement, the silence is instantly destroyed and the noise begins again. This continuous mechanical chatter of the mind is what keeps you permanently stuck, heavy, and immobilized in your life's journey. You are constantly seeking a meaning, a purpose, or a destiny to justify your existence, turning your life into a serious, stressful business transaction. But I tell you that existence has absolutely no meaning, and that is its greatest glory and freedom. What is the meaning of a beautiful rose opening its petals to the morning sun? What is the meaning of a white cloud floating lazily across the empty blue sky? What is the meaning of a river winding its way through the mountains towards the shoreless ocean? There is no meaning, no purpose, and no utility value. There is only a magnificent, overflowing expression of beauty, joy, and celebration. The moment you drop this childish demand for meaning, the moment you realize that life is a beautiful, purposeless play, a deep relaxation happens within your soul. You are stuck because you are constantly trying to live for the future, sacrificing your precious present moment at the altar of some distant, fictional goal. You think that when you achieve a certain position, acquire a certain amount of wealth, or find a perfect relationship, you will finally be happy. But that tomorrow never arrives. It is a permanent mirage created by the mind to keep you running in its competitive wheels. When tomorrow comes, it always manifests as today. And because you have mastered the art of living in the future, you will immediately project your happiness into the next tomorrow, leaving your present existence completely empty, dry, and hollow. This is why you feel so fundamentally stagnant. True meditation means dropping this endless race entirely, bringing your entire vital energy, your entire passion, and your entire awareness into this immediate, pristine moment here now, and squeezing every single drop of juice out of it. When you live each moment with such absolute totality and intensity that nothing is left unlived, the past leaves no heavy psychological traces on your soul. It is only the unlived past, the repressed desires, the unfulfilled love affairs, and the unexpressed songs that become a toxic, crushing burden upon your subconscious mind. This historical accumulation of inner dirt is what makes you feel paralyzed and heavy. But a man who lives completely in the present never carries any luggage from yesterday. He dies to the past with every passing breath and stands completely fresh, naked, and innocent before the immediate reality of existence. He doesn't care about heaven or hell because he has discovered the ultimate paradise within his own heart. He is an ordinary person, yet his very presence becomes an extraordinary, transforming catalyst for everyone who has the eyes to see and the sensitivity to feel. To cultivate this high level of awareness, you must understand the essential difference between communication and communion. Communication happens through the medium of words, concepts, and rational intellect. It is a superficial transaction between two minds. But communion is a profound, silent meeting between two souls. It takes place only when words are completely put aside, when the noise of the personality fades away, and you are able to simply sit in the presence of an awakened being. Throughout my decades of speaking, my real effort has been to draw you away from communication and melt you into communion. Those who are only intellectually curious, who hang around me simply to feed their analytical minds with philosophies, are bound to drop out when the silence deepens. And that is a beautiful, natural weeding process, because I am not here to entertain your intellect. My purpose is far deeper. I want to guide your consciousness to the point of absolute, wordless stillness, where no language is needed to understand the ultimate reality of life. This pristine, silent dimension of existence was perfectly embodied by that magnificent, mysterious old man I met in my youth, Magga Baba. He spent his entire life in absolute, unbroken silence, carrying nothing but a simple plastic jug from which he received his water and food. He never told anyone his name. He never uttered a single word of philosophy, and he never gave any lectures or guidelines. Yet, his silent presence was so immensely magnetic that simple, uneducated people would gather around his open porch just to sit near him, touch his feet, and experience a faint reflection of his inner peace. Deep in the quiet winter nights, when everyone else had gone, I would sit with him in the dark. One night, he broke his lifelong silence just for me, forcing me to speak to the world. He told me that he had failed to convey his inner treasure because humanity is completely deaf to silence, and that since I was young and intelligent, I must use the medium of language to pull people towards the wordless abyss. He warned me that if I did not begin soon, the vacuum of the innermost zero would pull me so deeply inwards that I would drown in my own bliss forever, leaving the rest of the world to suffer in darkness. This innermost zero is the true home of your subjectivity, a fathomless abyss where there are no obstructions, no boundaries, and no definitions. The conditioned mind is profoundly terrified of this zero, because to enter it means the absolute death of your false ego, your social prestige, and your borrowed identity. To avoid this inner death, you participate in the toxic social game of comparison, trying to measure your worth against the achievements of those around you. You are constantly comparing your intelligence, your wealth, your physical appearance, and your status with others, creating a permanent state of tension, jealousy, and self-condemnation. But I tell you that comparison is an absolute psychological illusion, because every individual is fundamentally unique and incomparable. A rose can never become a lotus, and a lotus can never become a rose. They are both perfectly beautiful expressions of nature in their own unique way. The moment you drop all comparison, the moment you accept your absolute uniqueness without any judgment, the heavy armor of the past drops away instantly, and the locked river of your life force begins to flow again with immense vitality. To live without comparison means to exist entirely in the immediate presence of the here and now, because comparison can only survive when you move away from the present moment into the dimensions of memory or future imagination. The mind is a chronic projector of time. It feeds on the dead weight of yesterday and the empty illusions of tomorrow. But time is an absolute fiction of human language and social programming. Existentially, it is always now, always this very breath, and always this immediate space. When you allow your awareness to rest completely in this pristine immediacy, the mind loses its grip over your reality, and the heavy layers of your subconscious conditioning begin to dissolve like morning mist in the rays of the sun. You are stuck in your life simply because you have allowed your mind to become a specialized, formatted machine, a rigid box of concepts that completely separates you from the wild, uncharted playground of existence. True intelligence means breaking this box into pieces, stepping out of the mechanical crowd, and daring to face your own sovereign aloneness with absolute clarity. This radical step of reclamation is deeply resisted by your society because all your established institutions, your schools, your governments, and your orthodox religions are designed to reward conformity and punish individuality. They want a uniform crowd of submissive puppets who can be easily controlled and utilized as tools for their vested political and economic interests. To keep you enslaved, they have created a sophisticated network of artificial moralities and spiritual traps, turning your natural instincts into a permanent source of inner guilt. They praise the saint who tortures his physical body, starves his senses, and denies his natural biological needs under the absurd illusion that self-inflicted misery is a shortcut to divine grace. But I tell you that these celebrated saints are nothing but clinical, masochistic cases who are deeply sick within their unconscious minds. Their spirituality is not a flowering of consciousness. It is a violent, perverted war against nature itself. True virtue can never arise out of a suppression of your life force. It can only blossom as a natural, spontaneous byproduct of your absolute wholeness and meditative awareness. This ultimate awakening is not something that requires an effort or a journey towards a distant goal. It is a simple, immediate relaxation into what is already here. You have been running for so long after the shadows of the outer world that you have completely forgotten how to sit quietly and allow your own inner garden to blossom. The universe has provided you with all the necessary ingredients for absolute fulfillment. Nothing is missing, and nothing needs to be added from the outside. You just have to reverse the direction of your observation, turning your gaze away from the objective objects that obstruct your view and letting it rest entirely on the fathomless source of the knower himself. In that simple turning, you realize that you are not a separate entity cut off from the vast whole, but a vital, pulsating part of this intelligent, celebrating cosmos. The stars are vibrating within your blood, the wind is breathing through your lungs, and the silent ecstasy of godliness is exploding in every single cell of your physical body. Stop being a beggar, standing at the doors of dead temples, trying to borrow an identity from a blind crowd, and claim your absolute sovereign birthright as a uniquely divine expression of nature right now. You feel profoundly stuck and stagnant in your day-to-day existence because you have allowed these unnatural, forced moralities to create a deep, toxic split within your own soul. One part of your being wants to dance, laugh, and celebrate the natural juice of life, while another part, the voice of your parents, your priests, and your teachers stored in your subconscious is constantly pointing a finger of condemnation at your joy. This inner conflict is what creates your deep psychological paralysis, leaving you stranded in a dark ditch of anxiety and meaninglessness. To wash away this historical accumulation of dirt, you do not need to follow a new leader, memorize a new set of rules, or accept a new set of beliefs. You simply need to bring the sharp, uncompromising light of your own conscious watchfulness into the dark corners of your mind. Sit in absolute stillness, close your physical eyes, and let your awareness fall into the fathomless, silent abyss of your own subjectivity here now. Watch the chaotic traffic of your thoughts, your anxieties, and your memories pass by without choosing, without judging, and without condemning them. As you watch, the crowd naturally vanishes. The noise completely fades into the background, and you are left in a state of pristine, unconditioned clarity. Let go of all your heavy luggage. Drop the false desire to find a predefined purpose or meaning, and allow your unique, authentic life to explode into a magnificent dance of absolute freedom. Take a very deep, fully relaxed breath right now. Melt completely into the silent, pristine vibration of this space. Abandon all your old worries and feel the magnificent, creative current of glorious existence washing your soul clean of all the centuries of darkness. You are already whole, you are already perfect, and you are already infinitely free in this glorious immediate moment. Just allow this profound inner silence to grow much deeper within your living heart. With every single beautiful passing heartbeat, feel the exquisite presence of your own timeless soul, and let the great golden river of your unique individual life flow beautifully without any resistance or hesitation. Right now, here now, in this sacred, pristine temple of ultimate spiritual awakening. This ultimate freedom is not a goal to be achieved in some distant, imagined future, but a living reality to be experienced in this very breath. You have spent your entire existence trapped in the horizontal dimension of time, running frantically after the empty illusions of tomorrow, while completely ignoring the vertical breakthrough of the here and now. To cleanse your subconscious mind is to step out of this mechanical race entirely, to drop the heavy armor of your childhood programming, and to dare to look directly into the fathomless abyss of your own subjectivity. There is no personal God to satisfy, no artificial morality to fulfill, and no dead savior to follow. You are already a unique, unrepeatable masterpiece of nature, carrying within yourself the absolute organic potential for ultimate awakening. Allow your chaotic thoughts to dissolve into pristine silence. Let your false ego evaporate into nothingness and feel the magnificent creative current of existence vibrating in the deepest core of your being. If your heart has deeply resonated with this silent space of awareness, take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share this alignment of consciousness with those you love. If you feel a deep urge to support the continuation of this work and help us reach more sleeping souls, you can participate directly by clicking the Join button to become a member of our global spiritual family, or offer a gesture of love through a super thanks donation. You can also access our definitive guide for inner transformation, the Hidden Energy Protocol. Reclaim your God Mode ebook, which is available directly in the descriptions below, to support your daily meditation and reclaim your true divine nature here and now. Remain completely silent, breathe deeply, and let this inner peace settle into your soul.